Namaste and good morning, everyone. Let's do some prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhurbhuvasvaha, Tatsavitruvarenyam, Vargo Devasya Dhimani, Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat, Asto Ma Satkamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mrityurma Amritam Gamya. Om Sena Bhavatu, Sena Bhunaktu, Saviryam Karvavahi, Tejasvinavadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishavahi. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let's open our Uddhava Gita books. We are on chapter 18 now. The philosophy of Sankhya. This is what Lord Krishna is talking about. To his friend, to his devotee, to his cousin, Uddhava. So let's start with the verse number 20, page number 580 in our books. Sargaha pravartate tavat purvapyena nityashah mahan gun visargartha sthiti antaho yavad ikshanam. As long as the Supreme Personality of Godhead continues to glance upon material nature, the universe will continue to exist. Manifesting through procreation of the great and variegated flow of universal creation for the sake of the conditioned souls. By the interactions of the three modes of material nature, various types of bodies are created. And by procreation, this process seems to go on perpetually. In order to maintain the conditioned souls who have the spirit of material enjoyment, the creation continues to exist for as long as the Lord glances over it. So last week we learned about it, that how this creation happens. It's like a glance. The Lord glances at the Prakriti and Prakriti starts to function. Material nature and time cannot function independently. They are active only as long as the Supreme Lord continues to glance over them. Time and the cosmic manifestation are created just to give the conditioned souls who are averse to the Supreme Lord a field of activities. Okay? And conditioned souls, the Jivatmas. We are all Jivatmas right now. Verse number 21. Viran maya asadhyamano shokalpaha vikalpaha panchtavai visheshai kalpate bhuvanai saha. I manifest the universal form, which displays endless variety through repeated creation, maintenance, and destruction of the planetary systems. Originally containing everything within myself, my universal form manifests the varieties of creation by arranging the coordinated combination of the five gross elements. So the whole creation, the whole manifested world is made up of these five gross elements. And what are those elements you are familiar with? Earth, water, fire, air, and space. So the Supreme Lord in his form as time pervades the entire universe. After creating all planets and living entities through the agency of the material nature, he finally withdraws the entire creation. The word Panchatva in this verse means death. The Supreme Lord in his form as time repeatedly creates, maintains, and annihilates the universe. So now next a few verses are together. So verse number 22 to 27. Let's recite them first. Annehe praliyate mratyam annam dhanasu liyate. Dhanaha bhumau praliyante bhumir gandhe praliyate. Apsuhu praliyate gandha apascha swagune rase liyate jyotish raso jyoti rupe praliyate. Rupam vayuns च स्पर्शे लीयते सो अपि च अम्बरे अम्बरम शब्द तन्मात्र इंद्रियाणि स्व योनिषु योनिर्वैकारिके सौम्ये लीयते मनस ईश्वरः शब्दो भूतादिम अप्येति भूतादिर्महति प्रभु स लीयते महान स्वेषु गुणेषु गुणवत्मः ते अव्यक्ते संप्रलीयन्ते तत्काले लीयते अव्यय कालो माया मयो जीवे जीव आत्म निमेजचे आत्मा केवल आत्मस्थो विकल्प पाए लक्षणः. So these are the verses 22 to 27. Let's look at the literal translation first and then the explanation. At the time of the annihilation, the bodies of the conditioned souls merge into food, food merges into grain, and grains merge into the earth. The earth merges into its quality of fragrance, fragrance merges into water, and water merges into its quality of taste. The taste merges into fire, and fire merges into its quality of form, which then merges into the sky. Okay, so the grosser merges into the subtler. Sky then merges into its quality of sound. The senses of the living beings merge into their predominating deities. With these demigods merges into mind. Mind merges into false ego in goodness, and sound merges into the false ego into the mode of ignorance. Finally, false ego merges into the total material substance, which then merges with the modes of nature. The modes of nature then merge with the unmanifest nature, and the unmanifest merges into time. So from the Vyakt to Avyakt to the Kal. Time then merges into the super soul who provides inspiration to all living beings. Thus I remain alone after the dissolution of the universe, self-satisfied in the transcendental position. So in this regard, the Vedic evidence can be cited. The Madhva, etas madmanaha, akashaha, sambhutaha, akashvayu, vayoradmihi, agnir apaha, adbhya prithvi, prithvivya, oshdeya, nam, ananta purushaha. So from the Supreme Personality of the Godhead, ether was manifested, akash. From ether, air was manifested. From the air, fire was manifested. From fire, water was manifested. From water, earth was manifested. From earth, medicinal herbs were manifested. From herbs, grains were manifested. And the living entities subsisted on food, grains. This is a description of the process of creation and the process of annihilation. Is a reversal of this. It is stated that just before the time of annihilation, there will be no rainfall for 100 years. And as a result, there will be no food grains. Because of no food grains upon which the living entities subsist, all material bodies will perish. Thus, there will be complete famine, and the grains, along with their seeds, will merge into earth. Earth will merge into smell. In this way, the process of annihilation will continue. The earth will be dried up by some vartak and then burned by the fire emanating from the mouth of Lord Sankarsha. After that, there will only be the subtle qualities of the elements and nothing else. The senses will merge into their own cause. The Tejas false ego will merge into the Vikarika false ego. And the Vikarika false ego will merge into the mind. And the mind will merge into the supreme controller. The mind is the controller of the working senses and the knowledge acquiring senses. So Karmendriya and Gyanendriya. The sky will merge into the sense objects. The sense objects will merge into the tamas, false ego. And three false egos will merge into the Mahat Tattva. The Mahat Tattva will merge into the material modes of the nature, and the three modes of material nature will merge into the unmanifested material nature, Pradhan. The neutral state of existence of the three modes of material nature is called dissolution. In this state of neutrality, the unmanifested material nature will merge into the time. Still, it is impossible to perfectly describe the dissolution of the material nature. It has therefore been stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 12th chapter. The unmanifest material nature is not subjected to the 6 kinds of transformation caused by the influence of time. Rather, it has no beginning and no end. It is the eternal and infallible cause of creation. So talking about the unmanifested Prakriti. Okay. Material nature has existed since time immemorial. In the story of Jayant, when Antarika described the annihilation, there is no mention of the material nature's annihilation. Therefore, it said in the Srimad Bhagavatam, this is the annihilation called Prakritikaha, during which the energies of the Supreme Lord and his unmanifest material nature, disassembled by the force of time, are deprived of their potency and merge into him. So that's why it's called the Ishwar is eternal, and so is the Prakriti. But Prakriti changes the form, but the Ishwar doesn't change. But they both are eternal. Material nature, along with her 3 modes, is dissolved so that her power of creation is withdrawn. The living entities actually are not subject to annihilation. They are eternal and inexhaustible, belonging to the Lord's superior energy known as Tatastha Shakti. There is no question of the living entities losing their real identity and spiritual form. After annihilation of the universe, the living entities merge into the existence of the super soul. Although they merge, they do not lose their individuality. Okay, so it's very clear. Sometimes people think that no, when the pralaya comes, we attain the moksha. No. In the unmanifest form, we stay like that. And when creation happens again, with the glance of the Lord, we come back with our own same old vasanas. So from the unmanifested to the manifested, from the manifested to the unmanifested. After the temporary material manifestations are merged into their respective causes, these conditioned souls who have qualified for their liberated state of existence achieve an inclination toward the Lord's service. The segmented manifestation of time then places the liberated souls on the platform of eternal service within the realm of undivided time. Until the conditioned souls achieve shelter at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, they continue to remain under the control of the material nature. The influence of segmented time creates various kinds of inauspiciousness for the living entities. The conditioned souls struggle for existence under the control of the three modes of material nature. Being conditioned by the modes of nature, they swing like a pendulum, alternating between a state of material enjoyment and one of renunciation. As long as there is no resolute determination to engage in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord, such an incompatible state of being will continue to exist. Verse number 28. Evam anvikshmanasya katham vaikalpiko brahma manso hridi tishtet vyomani varkadehetamaha. When the sun rises, darkness is dispelled. Similarly, when factual understanding of the universal dissolution is realized, the illusory conceptions of duality cannot remain in the mind of the serious transcendentalist. Even if such illusion enters his mind, it will not remain. Due to illusion, one considers the material body to be the self. But by carefully analyzing the difference between matter and spirit, by studying the Sankhya philosophy, such illusion will vanquish. And one will come to realize that he is a pure spirit soul. Just as the rising of the sun dispels darkness, and understanding of Lord Krishna's teachings to Uddhava dissipates one's ignorance. One who realizes the truth of these instructions will be relieved of the bodily conception of life. Even if some residual material attachment sometimes crops up, it will not remain due to the strength of one's spiritual realization. Okay, it's almost like if there is a little cloud, with the force of the wind, cloud gets moved away. That's how the ignorance in this kind of a personality, even if it comes, it can be shaken off very easily. Last verse of this chapter. Eshah Sankhye Vidhi Prokta Sanshya Granthi Bhedna Pratilomanu Lomabhyam Pravar Drishmaya. Thus, I, the original seer of everything, material and spiritual, have imparted to you this knowledge of Sankhya, which destroys the illusion of doubt by a scientific analysis of creation and annihilation. The material mind accepts and rejects many different understandings of reality, generating innumerable false arguments about the actual process of perfection. But those who have taken shelter at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord can see everything in its right perspective. By directly and indirectly discussing these topics of the Supreme Lord and his energies, the conditioned souls can be liberated from material bondage and attain eternal service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because that is the aim of the satsang. And satsang, we discuss these things, try to understand. So there are many varieties of satsang. Sometimes people just only sing bhajans. But ultimately, while singing or chanting or discussing, learning, we are trying to understand who are we? with the help of others or with our own introspection. So that was a Sankhya. And who is the founder of Sankhya philosophy? Kapil Dev. Okay. But Lord Krishna, in a very beautiful way, explained it to us in this chapter. So let's look at start chapter 19 also. We'll do a few verses and then we'll stop. So the three modes of nature and beyond. So let's look at the summary of this chapter. In this chapter, the effects of the influence of the three modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are described. So Satvikta, Rajsikta, and Tamsikta. Such knowledge ultimately culminates in an understanding of the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. Okay. So it's not that God is a Satvik, Rajsik, Tamsik, it is a God's Prakriti, Maya, has these three qualities. Godly qualities such as tolerance and self-control are manifestations of the mode of goodness. Material desires, feverish endeavor, and false pride are indications of the predominance of the mode of passion, Rajsikta. Foolishness, uncontrolled anger, and insatiable greed are characteristics of the mode of ignorance, Tamsikta. Every conditioned soul is influenced by a mixture of these three modes. So in other words, nobody is 100% Sattvic or 100% Rajasic or Tamasic. Mixture keeps on changing. And according to one's situation under the modes of nature, the false ego of I and mine take on various aspects in terms of one's behavior, personality, concept of religion, and engagements in sense gratification. So we see the color of these guns in every aspect of our personality. Because normally we think it's only the food, sattvic food, rajasic food, tamasic food. No, it's our behaviors also, and other aspects of our life also. A person primarily influenced by the mode of goodness certainly worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a matter of duty, without consideration of personal profit. Okay? So bhakti also, nishkam bhakti. Doing the bhakti because it's my duty, not to get something out of bhakti. So a person primarily influenced by the mode of goodness certainly worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a matter of duty. That it's our duty to worship, without consideration of personal profit. So whenever we do sakam bhakti, that's not a sattvic bhakti. One who worships the Supreme Lord in the hopes of some kind of material improvement is primarily influenced by the mode of passion. That's a Rajsikta. Crime and violence are exhibited by those who have sunk deeply into the influence of the mode of ignorance. Although these modes of nature direct the thoughts and activities of all the conditioned souls, they have no effect upon the Supreme Lord, okay, who remains fixed in his transcendental position. Okay, so Atma, Paramatma, no effect of these guns on them. We cannot say that this is a Sattvic Atma or a Tamasic Atma. Whatever is experienced in this world, the time, place, circumstances, results of karma, objects, activities, performers of activities, one's faith, development of consciousness, the destination after death, and so on, are permitted by the three modes of material nature. However, everything in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, everything employed in his service, places of his pastimes, activities offered for his satisfaction, the performer of devotional service, time spent in his devotional service, and so on, is transcendental to the three modes of material nature. So, in other words, when we connect ourselves totally with God, God is beyond this material nature. The energy of the Lord is manifested in an unlimited variety of conditions of life for the living entities who are rotating within the cycle of birth and death. All such conditions of life are manifestations of the three modes of material nature, and they are the results of the conditioned soul's fruitive activities. One can free himself from the influence of the three modes of material nature by engaging in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord. Human life is the opportunity for cultivating knowledge of the absolute truth. And any sane man will surely avail himself of this rarely obtained facility. So they say that to be born as a human being is extremely rare. Don't lose this opportunity. By a careful cultivation of the mode of goodness, one can overcome the influence of the lower modes of passion and ignorance. Okay? So, moving wholeheartedly towards the sattvika, that is in our hands. Thereafter, one can advance even further by rising above the mode of goodness to the transcendental platform of devotional service. When one is fixed in the devotional service of the Lord, his ultimate destination is the association of the Supreme Lord in the spiritual sky, which is attained when, by his grace, the gross and subtle coverings are dissolved at the time of death. So that ultimately that moksha is attained by the grace, not by our effort. Our effort is only to rise ourselves up to sattvika. So let's see what Lord Krishna says. The verse number 1. Gunanam samishranam puman yen yatha bhavet tanme purush vareyadam upadharye shansatah. The Supreme Lord said, O foremost of men, please listen attentively as I describe how the conditioned soul is awarded his particular nature due to the association of the three modes of material nature. This chapter describes the different natures produced by the three material modes of nature and how these modes manifest varieties within this world. Also described are the liberated souls and the Supreme Lord, who are transcendental to the three modes of material nature. So that means they have risen above the Prakriti, the Maya. Unless one rises above the influence of the three modes of material nature, one cannot give up the bodily concept of time, life. The analytical study of matter and spirit that is elaborated in the Sankhya philosophy and helps one rise above the influence of the modes of nature. Here the Lord gives a more elaborate description of the characteristics of the three modes of material nature. He says, O foremost among men, the three modes of material nature are sometimes seen in their pure condition and sometimes when they are mixed. The Supreme Lord will explain in this chapter how a person develops a particular personality according to the different manifestations of the material modes. By cultivating spiritual advancement, the living entities can achieve two kinds of knowledge. That which is received in disciplic succession and that which only gradually removes ignorance. In this manifest world, we find three things in our daily experience: the speaker, the topic, and the listener. This is the nature of the world governed by the three material modes. When the transcendental spiritual objective dominates the mind of the speaker, his talks will not contain any abomination born of the three modes of material nature. Indeed, his purpose of talking is to expose the abomination that is born of the material modes. If the conditioned souls of this world simply hear topics of Vaikuntha, they will gain relief from their anarthas, which have become temporarily manifested as a result of their material concept of life. All activities performed in this world under the control of the three modes of material nature are temporary, devoid of true knowledge, and full of misery. There is no possibility for materially conditioned people to obtain the eternal nature, which is full of knowledge and bliss, by hearing the talks of imperfect philosophers. So that means through our ears, whatever we hear, we got to be selective. Through our mouth, what we speak, we should be selective. Do we want to use these powers just for the material gain, or do we want to rise above this matter? In this chapter, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the speaker, because he is fully transcendental to the material modes of nature and because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He can establish the proper procedure for hearing and chanting, because non-devotees do not hear the topics of Lord Hari from the Lord himself. Due to being averse to his devotional service, they remain covered by the Lord's illusory potency. Being bereft of oral reception and disciplic succession, they remain ignorant of the science of the self and the science of God. The next two verses, verse number 2 and 3, and 4 and 5, they go together. Shamo, damas, titik tapaha, satyam, daya smriti, तुष्टिस त्यागो सप्रिया श्रद्धा हरित्या आदि स्वनिवृत्ति काम इहा मदस्तृष्णः सतंब आर्षे भिदा सुखम मदोत्साहो यशा प्रीति हास्यम वीर्यम बलोदमा क्रोधो लोभो नृतम हिंसा याचना दंभा कल महाकली शोक मोह विषादार्ति निद्राशः भीर अनुद्यमा सत्वस्य रजसम ते चेतास तमस च अनुपूर्वशः वृत्त्यो वर्णित प्राया सन्निपातम अथो श्रेणु. So Lord Krishna is saying that peacefulness, that is shama, self-control, that is dhamma, tolerance, the power of discrimination, remaining fixed in one's occupational duties, truthfulness, compassion, careful study of the influence of time, satisfaction, renunciation, detachment from sense gratification, faith, modesty, giving charity, and self-satisfaction are the qualities of the mode of goodness. So these are sattvic qualities. So if we want to cultivate more sattvikta in our nature, we got to pay attention to all of these. Lust, great endeavor, pride, thirst for material enjoyment, false ego, praying to the demigods for material wealth, discrimination between oneself and others, sense gratification, eagerness to fight, considering oneself to be supreme, fondness for flattery, the ridiculing of others, boasting of one's prowess, and justifying one's actions by dint of one's strength are the qualities of the mode of passion. So these are the rajasic qualities. Anger, greed, falsehood, violence, envy, hypocrisy, chronic fatigue, quarrel, lamentation, illusion, moroseness, poverty, fear, and laziness are the qualities of the mode of ignorance. That's it, tamsikta. Now hear about the combination of these three modes. Okay. So in the verse number 6, we'll talk about the combination. But let's look at the commentary on this by this author. The characteristics of the mode of goodness are peacefulness, self-control, iksha, which means the power of discrimination. Power of discrimination means knowing what is right, what's wrong, what is true, what is false. That is a discrimination. Tolerance, detachment, compassion, righteousness, submission, and satisfaction within one's own self. The characteristics of the mode of passion are lust, ego, which means great exertion, satambha, which means false pride, asi, which means to pray to the demigods for wealth, material enjoyment, mad, which means enthusiasm for fighting, flattery, desire for fame and adoration, boasting and considering oneself to be the greatest. The characteristics of the mode of ignorance are anger, hypocrisy, moroseness, and indolence. Because there's no accepting and rejecting based on the bodily concept of life in the pure mode of goodness, the mind can be easily controlled. So sattvic mind is a controlled mind. To remain undisturbed in the face of the dualities of material existence, such as heat and cold and happiness and distress, is called tolerance, titiksha. The best use of the power of discrimination is to cultivate knowledge of the spiritual nature, which is eternal, full of knowledge and blissful. We are trying to look for bliss from outside, but bliss is our true nature. We are not in touch with that. That is the problem. Austerity means to accept even painful conditions that are favorable for spiritual advancement. Okay, so that is austerity. That is the tapa, doing something for the greater good. Truthfulness refers speaking frankly about the nature of reality without distorting the facts to please others. To instruct others about the purpose of human life is the best expression of compassion. To give up activities of sense gratification by employing everything in the service of the Lord is a real renunciation. To give up hankering for the possession of temporary sense objects is called detachment. To act on the order of the scriptures and not whimsically is termed righteousness. To patiently hear the topics of Lord Hari is called faith. To feel shame in the presence of abominable activities is termed modesty. When one engages in hearing discussions of the glories of the Lord without duplicity for attaining self-realization and self-satisfaction in this life, this is certainly an activity that is characteristic of the mode of goodness. Those who are influenced by the mode of passion have a great desire to enjoy the objects of the senses, and they are very ambitious, intoxicated by pride, never satisfied, always eager to amass more and more wealth and possessions, very egoistic. That's a Rajasika. Fond of worshipping the demigods for material improvement, was running here and there. And the goal is to get something in the matter. This devata, that devata. Envious of others' success, fond of being flattered and fond of ridiculing others, thinking themselves to be the greatest. Anger due to intolerance, miserliness, falsehood and speech devoid of scriptural evidence, inclination toward violence, desiring without deserving, hypocrisy, fondness for quarrel, lamentation over previous foolishness, illusion, moroseness, laziness, dependence, selfishness, fearfulness, and lack of enthusiasm are the symptoms of people who are in the mode of ignorance. Okay, so in a detail, sure, Lord Krishna also in those verses gave us all that, but then in this commentary and purport, we see even further elaboration what those words mean also and what Lord Krishna is saying. So next week we'll start with verse number 6, where he is going to talk about the combinations of the modes of nature. Because as I said earlier, nobody is 100% sattvic or rajasic or tamasic. It's a mixture of it. So how do we recognize that? We will learn more and more about it in this chapter. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaye Purnameva Vishishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you very much.